Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out our GRADnavigate workshop series on supervisory relationships and self-advocacy. If you're checking this out on our YouTube channel, I hope it gives you some great information and tips for navigating your relationships with your supervisors, maybe even colleagues in your league, and other relationships in your life. Like all of our workshops, I'd like to start with a territorial acknowledgement. The University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is coordinated within the Office of Indigenous Relations. As a personal acknowledgement, as someone whose ancestors settled in the territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, Wet'suwet'en, and Mississauga peoples, I seek to learn more about the injustices Indigenous peoples face, as well as the call to actions advocated for by attending workshops, reading, and conversing with the people around me. I recognize acknowledgements like this are only one step towards reconciliation, and there's still a lot of work to be done across Canada related to the inequities, barriers, and damage colonization has caused. So I highly recommend checking out the Office of Indigenous Relations. They have fantastic resources, training, and events for you to see. So you may be wondering, who is this person that's talking to you about supervisory relationships and all the content that you're going to be learning today? I am Ashley Ryan. I am the Graduate and Postdoctoral Programming Specialist over at Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs. My email is on the slide, but you can also reach out to me along with the other graduate and postdoctoral programming professionals in our office at gradexperience@uwaterloo.ca. A little bit of information about me is I did all my degrees at Waterloo. So I started with my undergrad in legal studies and sociology, and then I transitioned to doing my master's and my PhD in sociology as well, doing crime research. And I completed my PhD here in 2023. So over the years, I've also was a student wellness coordinator over at the Grad Student Association. I was an off-campus Don for a number of years on campus as well. So with all that to say, I have seen and had conversations with students who have had various experiences and sometimes difficulties navigating relationships with supervisors and other people on campus or off campus. So this is kind of the things we're going to be talking about today. One thing to know about supervision is it is among the most influential factors affecting the student experience. And in terms of supervision, this is extremely important, especially if you are a graduate student in either a research-based master's program or if you're a PhD student who may be here for 4 or more years that are working closely with a supervisor. And so it really is going to play a large factor and a large part of your academic career while you're here. In terms of my PhD experience and my master's experience, in both cases, I had the same supervisor, Dr. Owen Gallup. I was extremely lucky with Dr. Owen Gallup. He was a fantastic supervisor. My learning style and his supervision styles often worked very well together. He was a very supportive supervisor. We had really great open communication. And we have continued to pursue our professional relationship together in terms of publishing and things like that. And so my hope is whether it's now or in the future that you have a supervisory relationship such as this, that you can look back on with great memories and positive experiences. Students and supervisors both have a role to play to ensure a positive supervisor-student relationship. So, yes, I definitely encourage you to be looking at this content, and it is your responsibility as a graduate student to kind of build this positive relationship with your supervisor. But at the end of the day, it is also your supervisor's responsibility. Both people, or maybe three people if you have co-supervisors, play important roles in that relationship. It shouldn't be one-sided. It should be everyone who's involved that is making the effort to make sure that it's a good experience. One part of the supervisory relationship that is important to understand, and as well in general, is general responsibilities that you have across campus as a graduate student and the responsibilities and expectations of your supervisor as a faculty member supervising graduate students at the University of Waterloo. And we're going to go over some examples of those today. Here on the screen, you're going to see some examples of graduate student responsibilities. And so if you're ever kind of wondering, oh, like, is this my responsibility? Is it someone else's? One place that's a great resource to check is the Guide for Graduate Research and Supervision, which can be found on our website. We're close to where you found this link or on our graduate supervision webpage. If you just kind of Google Guide for Graduate Research and Supervision, like Waterloo, you're going to find this as well. And what this guide does is break down all of the important, really, responsibilities and expectations of you as a graduate student at the university, your supervisor, your departments, as well as your advisory committee that is overseeing your work. In terms of graduate student responsibilities, some examples that I've pulled today from the guide include having knowledge of and meeting all appropriate deadlines and regulations. And so in terms of here, I definitely want to point out that yes, there are definitely going to be potentially times in your graduate career and in life where you're unable to meet a deadline. Whether it be, maybe even a medical emergency or something else has come up that gives an obstacle from you from completing that deadline. The important thing is that you're aware of the deadlines and regulations that are in place and what's expected of you for that. And in the case where you find that you're not going to be able to reach a deadline, to reach out to your supervisor and have that conversation about potentially moving the deadline to see what other accommodations could be made or if there's a new set of deadlines that could be created. But also, it is also best that when possible to meet all deadlines, as well as your supervisor should be doing that as well. The second example is to be responsible for developing a sound research plan with achievable timelines and milestones. So yes, it's definitely important for your graduate supervisor to be guiding you and helping you in this process. But at the end of the day, as a graduate student who is becoming a researcher and an independent scholar, it is also your responsibility to develop a sound research plan and to push your program forward. The third example is that students should seek the advice of and coordinate with their supervisor. So just as that they should be providing you with guidance and be reaching out to you, it is also important that you make those steps to seek advice and have that coordination and communication with your supervisor. The fourth example, have an awareness of the services at the university available to promote well-being. So I don't expect you to memorize every single service and resource that are available to you across campus because there are many, right? We have health services, counseling services, which all fall under campus wellness. We have the Office of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism, the Conflict Management Office, the Graduate Student Association. We have a bunch of other kind of wellness-based and other resources across campus. The main important thing is to be just generally at least aware that these are resources and offices that exist on campus to support you. And not only is it important for you to be aware of this for yourself as a graduate student, but it's also really valuable to know this information for other graduate students that may be looking for advice or information on where to go on campus, or maybe even the undergrads that you are potentially teaching or TAing. The fifth example, discuss plans with supervisors prior to being absent from campus for brief periods. So like I mentioned with another example, of course, there may be times where there's an emergency that pops up where you may not be able to communicate delays or absence from campus in advance, and you may have to wait till the emergency is resolved or in a stable state before you go communicating that to your supervisor. But let's say, for example, you were going on vacation for a month, or you need to go travel back to your home country for a certain amount of time to take care of a loved one, whatever the case may be. It is important to have that conversation with your supervisor so that you're all on the same page and so that they know that you're going to potentially be delayed in certain things to them or in email communications, so that they don't have a different idea of, thinking that you're working for a month and just not messaging them. It's just important for everyone to be aware of where everyone's at. The last example I want to share to you is establishing mutual expectations with your supervisors and advisory committees. It's very important that you establish these mutually and have that communication factor. So again, just like similar to other examples, that you're all on the same page. So figure out what is mutually expected, figure out what your supervisor's expectations are and your advisory committee so that you don't have a different idea of what your responsibilities and expectations are. And then they end up clashing later, and there's miscommunication and confusion. So it's best to have those kind of conversations up front and as soon as possible. So, like I said, it's not only on you as a graduate student to be having all of this responsibility and expectations, it's also on your supervisor. Similarly, like I mentioned, you can find expectations and responsibilities of your supervisor in the graduate research and supervision guide that is mentioned on the slide. Here are some examples of responsibilities that your supervisor has while they are supervising you at the University of Waterloo in your graduate studies. Providing well-informed advice on academics and professional development. Number 2, ensuring that you have an advisory committee. So your role in shaping the advisory committee may look a little different depending on what program or your department, but you will play some form of role in that, and your supervisor also needs to be playing some form of role in ensuring that that committee is in place. The third example, arranging for regular meetings to ensure steady progress through the program, while thoroughly reviewing and providing constructive and timely feedback on all relevant written materials. So it should not be a case where, you meet your supervisor on day 1 of your program and then they go, okay, bye, I'll see you at the defense, right? That's not going to be working out very well in helping you navigate through your program. You're going to be potentially confused of where things are at. That's just not a great way to go about things. And so, although it is also your responsibility to have communication with your supervisor, it is also their responsibility, as according to our protocols and guide for graduate research and supervision, that is, your supervisor needs to be setting up regular meetings to ensure that you are progressing in your program under their supervision. What counts as regular meetings may look differently depending on the student-supervisor relationship, and maybe even different depending on the stage that you're at during your degree. So, for example, maybe you need less meetings while you're in coursework, but maybe you have slightly more frequently meetings as you jump into your research proposal or your dissertation. But there should be somewhat fairly regular meetings occurring, whether it be once a week, once a month, once a term, for example, but they can't be never happening. Similarly, your supervisor must be providing you with constructive and timely feedback on all relevant written materials. What's going to count as timely is going to really depend on what exactly they're providing feedback on. So, for example, giving you feedback on a 1-page written document is going to look a little bit different compared to what's reasonable for providing feedback on 70 pages worth of content that you've written. But either way, they shouldn't be leaving you without any sort of guidance or feedback for months on end. They should be communicating with you on terms of when you should expect to hear back from them with the feedback, how long it will roughly take, and it shouldn't take too long. Though recommending having total acknowledgement that they have other things going on as well. but you shouldn't be delayed in moving forward in your program because you're never hearing back from them. If you are, that is an issue that you should be communicating with your supervisor about. The next example I have is having a duty to engage in accommodations processes with accessibility services as requested and to provide appropriate accommodation to the point of undue hardship. So, one thing I want to mention about accessibility services, and we have a GRADnavigate recording for you that is available on our website, probably through the page that you found this link right here, is that accessibility services can provide accommodations for all graduate milestones. So if you have a disability or if you find you're in other circumstances where accommodations may be warranted, highly recommend reaching out to accessibility services. Not only can they potentially arrange accommodations related to your coursework in terms of testing or potentially assignment structure, they can provide and arrange for accommodations for things like your comprehensive exams or your defenses or other milestones that may be present in your graduate program. Related to this line, when an accommodation is set up by accessibility services, your supervisor is obligated to follow through with those accommodations. The last example I have on here is to inform you of any extended absence during which they will not be available to communicate and arranging for suitable communication methods and/or interim supervisors if the absence is for a period longer than 2 months. So, there should not be a case where your supervisor is potentially going on sabbatical or a leave for multiple terms and they're saying, okay, bye, like good luck. It is your supervisor's responsibility to be making sure that you're set up that you can move forward in your program while they are gone from campus. Whether that means that they are going to still maintain contact with you so you can move forward, or setting up someone else as your supervisor temporarily so that they can oversee your progress while they are gone from campus. If you are ever in a situation where your supervisor has had to leave campus or is currently on a leave and has stopped communicating with you and has not set up an interim supervisor, please reach out to your department because then it falls on them to set up interim supervision. So moving on, I want to really touch on supervisory styles. So just like you may have different learning styles as a student, supervisors have different ways that they supervise. The 4 ones that we like to kind of talk to with grad students about at the university are brought forward by Gadfield's research. And what Gadfield did was kind of create 4 different kinds of supervisory styles that are kind of on a spectrum. And they range from low and high structure and low support to high support. A few things I want to mention before we really dive into these 4 different categories is that none of these are bad in a sense, right? Sometimes if you have a different learning style or different learning needs and your supervisory style that is being emitted from your supervisor is completely different from that, that's where there may be a problem or a conflict that may arise. But it doesn't mean that any of these are inherently bad. Another thing I want to mention is that this is all on a spectrum, right? You may find that your supervisor falls a bit more into the pastoral side, but it doesn't mean that they aren't, maybe in the middle of 2 of them, or that they can't move from different supervisory styles. The last thing I want to mention before we dive into it is that your supervisor may change their supervision style depending on where you're at in the program, along with conversations that you have with your supervisor about your needs as a student. All right, so let's go into it. What do these 4 mean in terms of like the low support, high support, and structure that we have on the screen? Well, on the top left corner, we have the pastoral supervisory style. And you'll see on the screen, it is in the low structure but high support section. So what this is, trying to paint a picture for you, this is a supervisor that maybe is not providing a lot of structure in terms of setting you up in your degree. Like they're not being very hands-on with your, outline and your deadlines and what you're doing. They're allowing you to do that kind of academic exploration by yourself. They maybe still be there, of course, to ask questions to, but they're letting you kind of take that independent academic nature and move forward in your program. But they're high support, meaning that they're typically really there for you. They're providing that emotional support. They're providing those resources to you that are across campus. They're there for you if you need them. Maybe they're encouraging you and they're sending you professional development opportunities. So they're really a great supportive supervisor, but they are a bit more hands-off when it comes to the structuring of your program and what steps that you're going to take next as a grad student in your research. To the rega pastoral, we have the contractual supervisory style, which is high support and high structure. So here you still have that supervisor who's providing a lot of support. They're there if you need them. They're providing emotional guidance. Maybe they're providing you resources on opportunities that are popping up across campus. In addition to that, they're also providing the high structure, such as maybe they're very heavily involved with outlining your research and figuring out deadlines with you. They just have a very more hands-on approach in terms of your academics. So again, the pastoral and the contractual, both really high supportive supervisors, but the pastoral is providing a less hands-off, more hands-off approach in your academics, and the contractual is very more hands-on in what you're going to be doing next in your research. The bottom left corner, we have the laissez-faire approach, which is low support and low structure. This doesn't mean necessarily that your supervisor is completely absent or not answering questions that you have. They're just maybe very hands-off, right? They're there for you if you need them in terms of academics or otherwise, but they're not going to go out of their way to give you that structure or that support. So they're very hands-off. They're kind of observing from a distance, let's say. And then to the last in the bottom right corner, we have the directorial supervisory style, which is low support and high structure, meaning that they may be very involved in your research and providing deadlines and guidelines and things that you may want to do next in your research and feedback and things like that. But they're maybe not providing the other support, such as, the emotional support or the encouragement or some resources across campus that are not related to your academics. So like I was saying earlier, none of these styles are necessarily bad. The only part where they become bad is when they clash with your needs as a student. And again, I want to emphasize that supervisors may drift to different kinds of supervisory styles. You may need a different supervisory style depending on where you are in your program. So it's not really, black and white, really cut dry. Let me give you an example. My supervisor that I talked about earlier, Dr. Owen Gallup, I would say, depending on my needs in my program, whether when I was master's or PhD, let's get the PhD as an example, I kind of drifted a bit more in between pastoral and contractual. So for example, while I was in coursework during the first year of my PhD, he was great at providing support and resources and always there to chat if I needed to talk with him. But he wasn't providing a lot of structure for what courses I was taking or steps to move forward because I didn't need it, right? I knew what courses I wanted and needed to take. There wasn't as much of a structural role for him to play at that moment in time in my degree. Similar in terms of the comprehensive exams, right? Aside from giving the reading list, a lot of the process of the preparation was on me. Now, moving further on to the program in terms of really like the ethics application and data collection and analysis and the writing, because that was a lot more new to me and I was, a researcher really in training, he provided more of a contractual style, where he still was providing that great encouragement and high support, but he did play a bit more of a role in the feedback and steps for where we should be taking it next, and advice and tips on the analysis for data, for example. So as you can see, supervisors can kind of shift around, and your needs as a student will also shift. You may be looking at this, and my hope is that you kind of maybe identify with your supervisor. Maybe there is a style that your supervisor leans to the most. And the important thing is to think about, what kind of supervisor do you need as a student? And if you find that yours is really clashing with your supervisor, have that conversation with them to see about the supervisor style and if it can shift a little bit. And if it really is not shifting, there's a potential you may need to find a new supervisor that works in the same alignment as you. Kind of similar to what I was talking about already, when there is a misalignment between supervisory styles and the learning needs of a student, or if other things that could come up, sometimes there may be conflict in a supervisory relationship, or the potential for conflict to arise in a supervisor relationship. So we're going to talk a little bit about why conflict might come up in a supervisor and graduate student relationship, how to avoid conflict, and how to address it, and along with those kind of potentially difficult conversations if you find that you're in a situation where this has come up. So looking at the research on conflict in terms of supervisors and graduate students, students report the main source of conflict with their supervisor is lack of feedback. But faculty very rarely report this as a source of conflict from their side. And I'm not really surprised by this. I've talked to literally hundreds of students over the years, and a large chunk of those students have had conversations with me about potentially a conflict that was starting with their supervisor, or confusion or frustration. And most of the time, it would come down to not feeling that they're getting enough feedback or on the timelines that they expected to receive feedback. And so most of my high advice from this is to have that communication with your supervisor. They may not know that it's even an issue. In terms of supervisors attribute their main source of conflict to students' personal characteristics, so inadequate research skills. It's not to say that, students necessarily have this inadequate research skills, but sometimes through lack of communication, maybe those attributes or skills haven't been shown or communicated, or maybe there has been a lack of attention paid by the supervisor to see the skills of the student. And lastly, sometimes cultural expectations and differences between cultures about the roles of students and supervisors may also differ across countries and time, and this can also create conflict. So, for example, the role of a student and a supervisor may play a very different may look very differently in a country such as potentially India or even Brazil or China compared to Canada, for example. In terms of wireless students who have reported conflict with their supervisors, which is a small proportion of students overall, attribute the source of conflict to the following. Things like not having enough guidance on research feedback or progress, unavailable or unresponsive supervisors, which often leads to delays and missed deadlines, and a lack of academic mentorship. So, for example, the supervisor does not support academic development or opportunities like conferences. Main thing that really most problems are going to boil down to is communication, or the lack thereof communication. And so if there is one thing that you get out of this recording today on the website, is that to have those open conversations and communication with your supervisor as early as possible, so that you can be all on the same page and figure out potential issues that may be arising, address them as soon as possible so you can move forward. So here's some additional tips about avoiding and navigating conflict in your supervisor relationship. Learn about and meet your potential supervisor ahead of time. So, really, when students have come to me in the past and maybe they're transitioning or looking for a new supervisor, maybe they're looking to move to Waterloo to join our university and they're kind of shopping around for the supervisor. And my advice, and the advice that I was given by upper year PhD students when I was looking around at different institutions, was to learn about and meet that person if possible before you start that relationship. So, look to see what kind of work they're publishing. What are their values? What are some social posts that they're making? What kind of classes do they teach? What do those reviews look like from students? Maybe even chat with some students who have been supervised by that person to see what their experience has been like. And again, if possible, always try to meet with your supervisor to see if that your communication styles and supervisory styles are going to be aligned before you start that process. Encourage an open line of communication from the beginning. Set boundaries and mutual expectations. So again, all through communication. Respond to emails within a reasonable time frame. So this could be 24 to 48 hours, but the reasonable time frame may, of course, look a little bit different depending on circumstances. The one thing that I always tell students, though, let's say you receive an email from your supervisor, and it requires you to do a bit more thinking, and you're thinking, oh, you know what? I have a lot going on right now. I'm not going to be able to get the information that they're asking for about like a week or 2 weeks. What I am encouraging you to do is not to ignore and let that email sit for 2 weeks. What I'm encouraging you to do is instead respond back to your supervisor saying, just acknowledging that I've received this email. I just need a little bit more time to think about this, and I expect to get back to you next week. That way, they don't think that you ignored them. They know that you're thinking about it and working on it, and you have given them a kind of rough idea of when to expect an answer by. This is also encouragement for the supervisors to also be doing the same with you, so that no one's left in limbo thinking like, did they just delete my email? Did they not see it? Like, are they just ignoring me? Right? Having that reasonable time frame that you're at least responding, even if you can't provide all the information right away, is very valuable. Discuss concerns and issues that arise as soon as possible. We don't want things to be boiling up and get you more frustrated over time. It's not going to be great for your mental health, and it's not going to be great for your relationship with your supervisor. As soon as you see a concern that has popped up, I know it's easier said than done, but try to have that conversation with them to address it. You'll feel better about it after, and it will be way better long term. Next, if you are comfortable when an issue arises with your supervisor, address it directly with your supervisor first before going to other staff members in your department or faculty. Of course, I want to preface this by saying there are scenarios, like for example, if you feel that you are being harassed or discriminated against, or you are not comfortable addressing an issue with your supervisor, I highly recommend that you chat with your department chair or associate dean in your faculty, for example. But if it's an issue just like, for example, a grading discrepancy or miscommunication in an email or something a bit smaller that you figure that may not have been like intentional, please address it with your supervisor first. This will do multiple things. First, it will probably resolve the issue way quicker than if you went to a third party, then they came back to your supervisor. And second, if this supervisor is someone who you want to be working with for a number of additional years and may want to continue a professional academic relationship with after your degree, if it's a small issue and instead of addressing it with them directly, you go to the department chair, who then addresses it with the supervisor, your supervisor may feel not so great about that, right? They may be embarrassed and they may be wondering why you didn't address it with them directly. And that might build a little bit of resentment in that relationship. So again, I want to say that if you are uncomfortable addressing an issue with your supervisor, or if it is something serious, highly recommend. You could totally bring in other people like your department chair. But if it's something that you feel that can be resolved and it's fairly minor, please, I highly recommend address it with your supervisor directly first. And lastly, you can get some one-on-one advice for how to navigate the issue. There are tons of resources on campus for this. You can get confidential advising sessions related to anything really in your graduate career here at U Waterloo from the Graduate Student Association. And you can also go to the conflict management office where they can help you, bounce ideas back and forth about the wording of an email or a meeting that you may be having with them to address a conflict. One thing that students are sometimes worried about is that they're kind of worried if they go to the conflict management office that it's going to launch an official complaint process. And I want you to remember that it is not going to do that. You can go and just have a confidential kind of chat or brainstorm conversation with the experts there, and it won't launch a complaint unless you are going there with the intention of wanting that to happen. So you can just go and just have that conversation and it will not go back to your supervisor. Here are some tips about avoiding and navigating conflict in terms of language. So, if you go up to your supervisor and you say, it's all your fault, I'm not done, and you start kind of yelling at them and blaming them for everything, that's probably not going to go over so well, right? Your supervisor maybe is going to get a bit defensive. It's not really offering a solution for moving forward. It's getting the emotions heightened. It's just not going to be very productive, right? It's just going to delay things even more potentially. Here's an example of something that may be a little bit better. Try neutral language that gets to really to the root of the problem and gets the message across more clearly. So something like, when I don't receive a response from emails I send you, it makes me anxious and frustrated. I feel this way because I want to make progress on the research for my thesis, and I require your feedback before moving forward to the next steps. I understand that you're busy with your research as well. Could we make a feedback plan that works for both of us? What this does is that you're clearly communicating your feelings about it, the issue that you're experiencing, which they may not be aware that you're experiencing, acknowledging that they are also busy as well, and to offer a solution. Like, hey, let's sit down, let's figure out a feedback plan together that can work with both of us. This is going to be way more productive for moving forward and better for your relationship than the previous example where you're just kind of blaming them. So now we're kind of jumping into the self-advocacy skills of this workshop recording. So what is self-advocacy? In the most basic sense, it is being willing to speak up for your own interests and needs. Rather than being pushed along by the flow of life, it means taking a more proactive role in ensuring that things proceed in a way that better aligns with your goals. So there's some things I have highlighted here on the slide that I want to mention. The first one I have highlighted is to speak up. So it is important if there is an issue that you're experiencing, I know again, easier said than done, it is on you if you're feeling a certain way and it's an issue to mention it to your supervisor, right? Either through email or vocally in a meeting. It's important to bring it up. The second one is taking a more proactive role. So doing things like meeting with your supervisor beforehand and researching how they carry themselves and the work that they do before you just jump into a supervisory relationship with them. So you're being proactive in steps in your graduate career comparing to just reactive, we're just waiting to see what happens. And the last one is ensuring that things proceed in a way that better aligns with your goals. So you have your goals in your life, in your grad school, outside of grad school, your supervisor does too, and other people that you meet with. That's just how it is. Everyone's human. And so you want to be having kind of relationships and things that happen to you in your life that better align with your goals. And the way that you're going to be doing that is through speaking up and taking that proactive role. So overall, this is kind of the gist of self-advocacy. Taking control. People who feel in control of various areas of their life report greater life satisfaction. Higher perception of control appears linked to achievement of more positive outcomes. And overall, individuals with higher locus or feelings or perception of control often experience elevated life satisfaction, persistence, conscientiousness, and psychological well-being. So you can take this control by doing those things I mentioned earlier, like speaking up, taking that proactive steps, and trying to have those communications and conversations with people to make sure that you have that control in your relationships in your life. So here's some more tips on self-advocacy. Build relationships and invest time in making connections with your cohort, with your department, staff, faculty, anyone really that you come across. It will be fairly beneficial in the future and now as a grad student. Organize and understand your time. Not only will this help kind of manage things in your life and figure out when you should be doing different things, but it will allow you to make time in your life to help you do things that you want to be doing, like hobbies or meeting up with friends, but it will also help you prioritize, it will help you prepare, and it will help figure out, identify, and make time for you to advocate for yourself. The next thing that I want to mention, which we have a whole page dedicated to on our GSPA current grad website, is to say no sometimes. As a graduate student, I know it can be harder said than done, and that we want to say yes to everything, right? Yes to every opportunity, yes to everything that our supervisor asks of us. The reality is we need to say no sometimes. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many things that we can do. There are circumstances where we need to say no because we either don't have the time to do it, we don't currently have the skill level to do it, maybe it's not something that we want to do or is beneficial for your program or your life. Sometimes you gotta say no. And there are tips for how to say no on our website. It's important to self-reflect. So really, think about yourself and where you're currently at. And it's important to know what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses and things you can improve on. Learn about resources, services, and policies that are available to you on campus. And practice self-sufficiency. So things like requesting information for yourself when needed. There are tons of services and people like myself across campus that are here to help you. This is my job. I'm paid and I'm here to help grad students across campus. And I'm providing information, but I'm not going to know that you specifically need specific information or support or help unless you come and chat with us or communicate that with me or the other services and staff and faculty across campus. So it's important to be able to communicate your needs to other people. Here are some additional strategies and resources as we're coming to the end and wrapping this up. Starting a conversation in general. So some questions you may want to ask your supervisor are things like, how often should we schedule check-in meetings? What is your preferred method of regular communication? What expectations do you have regarding my attendance in the office or lab? How would you like me to schedule and inform you about time away? Who will set up the supervisory committee and thesis committee? This is important to be all on the same page, like I was mentioning earlier. More conversation prompts. Is it appropriate for me to send along reminder emails to you? What time period is reasonable for me to expect for you to get back to me? Do you plan to take a research leave or sabbatical during my time in my program? How will you determine authorship or authorship order? Will I need to complete any ethics approval processes before data collection can begin? So this is kind of all important information for you to know as a student, but there also, through these kind of conversations, there will be important information for your supervisor to realize as well. When you go into a meeting with your supervisor or other people on campus you may have meetings with, here are some tips to consider. Some things work better from others. Maybe you don't need to use all of these things. Maybe you take some of them. Maybe it depends on the meeting, the type of meeting. But here are some examples of things that you could do to have a more proactive meeting. Things like setting an agenda. So create a schedule with specific topics and questions you have in advance, and then email this to your supervisor a few days in advance. What this is going to do is set an outline of, what the meeting is for, what you're going to be talking about, so you're not just coming up with things on the spot or just kind of taking time and not going anywhere. But this will also allow your supervisor to think about the answers to your questions, hopefully ahead of time of the meeting. And why this is going to be important is that it's going to mean that you're less delayed, hopefully. If you're just asking the questions during the meeting, and it's totally fine if a question pops up and you have to ask it during the meeting, but your supervisor may have to take it away and get back to you later, maybe a few days or a week. Whereas if you ask them ahead of time, they'll have a little bit of time to sit with the question and think about it so that they could potentially bring that information right to the meeting so you can take it and run. Take notes. So you're going to be here for a while, especially if you're a PhD student. There may be times that you want to even reference a meeting that you had a year ago. And so this is where it may be useful to take notes during your meeting about what you covered and what their responses were. Maybe even consider summarizing key takeaways after and maybe sending that to your supervisor to make sure that everyone is on the same page and you have the same understanding of what happened in the meeting. And identify outcomes. So marking key outcomes and action items for yourself, or your supervisor, or your committee, and sending these to your supervisor. So again, you're all on the same page of what's happening and what steps are being taken. Here are some additional tips for conversations overall with your supervisor. So try to avoid procrastination and avoidance. Prepare in advance. Keep the focus on facts instead of feelings. Use I statements instead of just, saying like you, because that's a bit more blamey. Avoid presumptions and clarify when necessary, because especially with assumptions and presumptions about what a supervisor knows or should know or something that they know is an issue, they might not actually know. So don't assume that they're going to know that something is an issue until you bring it up with them. Listen and reflect and paraphrase. Determine a follow-up meeting. And consider confirming in writing. So through an email. But really, it's important to remember, like I mentioned at the beginning of this all, is that it takes work on both sides. Just like a relationship with a friend or a sibling or a parent or a colleague working in the industry or any other human that you have a relationship with in your life, it takes work on both sides. You have responsibilities as a student. They have responsibilities to you as a supervisor. Both of you deserve respect in this relationship for it to work. Communication is going to help facilitate most of this. So here are some resources I want to guide you toward that may help you if you are experiencing some issues with navigating this relationship. So things like the Guide to Graduate Research and Supervision I mentioned earlier, the Graduate Studies Academic Calendar that really outlines processes for providing feedback. It provides you with the milestones that you need to complete for your program and talks about university responsibilities regarding supervisory relationships as well. Your graduate officer, your coordinator, and your department chair are all great resources. Even other people in your department, other grad students. The Associate Dean for Graduate Studies or your faculty administrative assistant can be of use. Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs, such as our team, or the Associate Vice President Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs can be of use to you. And support is also available with the Graduate Student Association and all the academic support units across campus, such as the Conflict Management Office. We have the Ombudsperson Office now, Accessibility Services, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism. There are just overall a lot of resources available and people to talk to across campus. We also have University of Waterloo policies that I encourage you to check out and be aware of. You don't have to memorize them, but it's good to know that they exist and what they generally talk about. Things like Policy 33, which is the ethical behavior policy. and Policy 70 on petitions and grievances, if you ever need to file one as a grad student. These are the takeaways that I want you to take from this recording on supervisor relationships, is that while having interactions with your supervisor, be respectful, establish your needs, communicate your boundaries, be specific in things like your conversations and what you need and what your boundaries are, and take initiative as a student. Start those conversations. Ask for those meetings. And that brings us to the end of this presentation. So again, you can always reach out to us at gradexperience@uwaterloo.ca for any questions you may have, but I highly recommend also checking out the other recorded sessions that we have on our GRADnavigate web series page on the Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs website. And hope to see you at some future events.